Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are continuing the arduous task of ranking the top 10 players at every position in the NBA. We have knocked out point guards, shooting guards, and small forwards. So go ahead and check those out if you haven't already and subscribe so you don't miss any more of our shows throughout the summer going forward. Today we are on to power forwards. And as we have acknowledged in every show up to this point, positions don't exist in the same clear-cut way that they used to in the NBA. We've just done our best to categorize these guys. And with the way that we have categorized them, this is a pretty loaded position, Logan. So before we get into the list itself, who was your toughest cut here?
My toughest cut on this list was the enigma that is Julius Randle, man.
Whoa.
Yeah, a very polarizing basketball player. Randle's raw numbers and efficiency would probably suggest that he should be here. I'm just not the biggest Julius Randle fan, man, in terms of what he brings defensively, how he can take the offense out of rhythm, turnover issues. Carson and I have talked in great detail about our issues with Julius Randle, and he's such a tough player to rank, man, just because the highs with Julius Randle are so high, man. And the lows are really freaking low. The damning number that eliminated him from my list is the fact that we have seen him in 2 playoff runs. His stats, 17 points, 9 boards, and 4 assists, on 34, 28, 76 splits with a true shooting percentage of 46.
Delicious.
Carson, he has the 13th lowest true shooting percentage of any 15-point-per-game playoff scorer in NBA history. Quite frankly, I just can't have that guy on my list. And like I said, man, when Randle's on, dude, he's a really fun player when he's weaponizing his physicality, when he's getting downhill, when he's getting to the rim, when he's really working to find a good jump shot. But I have seen black hole Julius Randle. I'm not a fan of that guy, and he doesn't bring me a ton of value outside of, his scoring. He brings you a little playmaking. He brings you some rebounding. He can play a little bit of defense because of his size and isolation, but he's not the most efficient guy. He can take the offense out of rhythm, and his decision-making is really frustrating at times. So I find Randle a really hard player to rank, and I respect his game, but I can't put him on my list.
You won't find a more long-time detractor of Julius Randle than yours truly. However, I think that this is a little bit far, Logan. I'm very interested in who you have in those 9 and 10 spots because although I am not a Randle guy whatsoever, we just talked about this in our small forwards episode. I think OG Anunoby is their second best player, and you can look at the raw production, right? I would just take the efficiency, the play finishing from OG and that all-world defense over Randle's inconsistency offensively, his frustration, his inefficiency, his ability to take the offense out of rhythm. But when I compare him to the guys who I was considering in this 10 spot, I just think they're all too flawed. Like, to me, the fact that he can, for stretches, that there could be a playoff run where he's on as a shot maker and he can give you 25, 10, and 5 on decent efficiency. Like, that upside to me just surpasses that of all of these guys who are in the range right below him because they are legitimately flawed basketball players, each and every one of them, in a way that, like I would say, an OG Anunoby is not. So my toughest cut, and I think this guy will probably be on your list, Logan, because Randle is off it, is Draymond Green. And I love Draymond. I've always loved Draymond. At this point, I just think, although he is still an all-world defender, the offensive limitations are apparent, even though he just had one of the better three-point shooting seasons of his career. He still has a monstrous impact defensively. It's not quite what it was at his peak. And I feel like in the 10 spot, I have a player who matches his value defensively and is also quite flawed offensively, but is a little bit more capable of taking on a volume role, is certainly more capable as a scorer. And what we saw from that guy this past postseason, to me, just showed more upside in terms of carrying a legitimate load within an offense than what you get from Draymond at this point. But I still think he is a massively impactful winning basketball player. I also want to shout out Aaron Gordon, just because I think you get so many areas of positive impact from AG. He is such a versatile offensive player. The dunker spot finishing is incredible. The offensive rebounding, the post-up mismatch attacking, running the floor in transition, acting as a tertiary ball handler. guarding multiple positions defensively. If you think about Denver's answers throughout the postseason to LeBron AD pick and roll, it was putting Gordon on AD. When Ant was toasting KCP, it was putting AG on Ant. Like, he's a very valuable all-around basketball player. I do also think that he is the beneficiary of an amazing situation, though, and I think the shot quality manufactured for him in Denver by Nikola Jokic is really, really high. He stars in his role. In a vacuum, I don't think he is quite top 10 at this position. And I'll shout out one more guy, just because I did think all these dudes were pretty darn close. Jaren Jackson Jr., I do not have on my list. And he was a center this past year. I hope and pray that the Grizzlies are planning on starting Edey and moving Triple J back to the 4, because I think he's much more effective in that role. But I just think his limitations as a rebounder, the fact that Draymond, the guy who I have in my 10 spot, are honestly clearing him by a good bit defensively, even though this is a defensive player of the year who we're talking about here. I just do not think he is capable of singularly holding down an interior defense at a really high level. He needs to be in that roamer role as a 4, and there he's a poor rebounder, and offensively took on more volume this year, but the efficiency was pretty rough. So I wouldn't have a problem with anybody having any of those guys in the 10 spot. However, I do think it's a little bit tricky to argue them above Randle just because of the massive, massive gap in shot making and shot creation. So for that reason, Logan, I am interested. Who is in your 10 spot?
The guy you were just talking about. I have Jaren Jackson Jr. in my 10 spot. And the reason I would prefer him to Julius Randle is Randle really hasn't shown me on the stage. And I can't say that Triple J has shown me either, but it's like Randle has shown me the ugly sides of his game twice on a really big stage where he's completely faltered. Now, I want to be clear about something. I don't hold the Hawks series as much against him. I think Randle was working just from a really hard standpoint offensively. Didn't have a whole lot of shooting around him. Didn't have a whole lot of creation around him. That was a tough situation, but that's a damning number. And Triple J at least does something consistently at his regular position, which is play defense at a really high level. I completely agree with you, Carson. I don't think this guy is a 5 moving forward. He is not a good enough rebounder. Not only have you seen that consistently in Memphis, you've also saw that with Team USA. I mean, that was a huge issue too, man, not being able to hold down the interior. And I think you really saw him struggle, especially to rebound even more with Steven Adams not out there, right? I mean, he's getting a few extra boards just because of that big dude boxing out. But I'm encouraged that next season, Jaren Jackson Jr. in his normal roamer role at the 4 spot is going to be more effective, is going to be a better defender. Because it was a bad year, man. He went from 3 blocks a game to 1.6 blocks per game a night. The Grizzlies went from 5.5 points better per 100 possessions defensively to actually over a point worse defensively with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the court. And he really struggled to score efficiently without Ja leading the offense and setting him up for easy buckets. And he's not an impactful rebounder, but the defensive floor that this guy gives me, the defensive playmaking that you get from Jaren Jackson Jr., I just think it's too great for me to not have him on this list. And he is a flawed offensive basketball player. By no means is he great there. This season, 23 points on 44% from the field, 32% from deep, 55% true shooting. He shot 33% on jumpers, just 34% on catch and shoot attempts. He's not just a seamless offensive scorer, and that's why he can't be higher on this list, but he is such a great defensive playmaker that I just value that skill set a little bit more than Julius Randle's flawed game. Like, he was worse than last year. By no means was he any better, but he held players 8.1% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That was the 12th best mark in all of the NBA, minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. And so next season, when I'm looking forward to it, I think Randle and Jaren Jackson Jr. are both going to look better because I think their situations have both improved. Randle's not going to have to carry a crazy load offensively because he can rely on Bridges. He can rely on Anunoby. He can rely on Brunson, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart. Like, there's a lot more talent there. Same goes for Triple J defensively. You got Edey in there now to anchor the interior. He can roam again. You got Marcus Smart back out there, right? They're getting more healthy. So I think both of these guys are going to look better next season. I just value Triple J's defensive-minded skill set a little bit more, and he's not a great offensive player, but I still do think in spots when Triple J's on, he can attack mismatches, he can hit the occasional mid-range jumper. I'd like to see him get better there because I think he really could climb. I don't ever really see that becoming a strength of Triple J's. I just don't think that's his game. but I think he's going to be a lot better defensively next season. I just think circumstances were really hard last year, and I'm not going to judge him too harshly for that. I still think he's a really talented basketball player. Is he flawed offensively? Yes. Is he a great defender? I still think so.
He is a very good defender, and he has taken strides offensively. He just had to take on more volume this past year, and we saw that in terms of self-creation. His isolation volume, I think, basically tripled, and he actually scored with pretty solid efficiency there, 63rd percentile. He has this very unique skill set of being 6'10", 240, a pretty fluid mover off the bounce, a pretty good ball handler at that size, pretty good three-point shooter at that size, pretty good floater touch. Like, there's so many tools that you would think he would be able to cohesively put together and be this super effective and efficient and productive offensive player. And yet, time and again, we've just seen a very frustrating level of inconsistency from him. I think back to what we saw in last year's playoffs against the Lakers, where he comes out in game one and he's playing bully ball. He's mismatch attacking. He's consistently committed to getting downhill as a driver, and then he basically disappears for the rest of that series. His three-point shot leaves him, and he's extremely disappointing. The playoff run before that, he was very inefficient, especially inside the arc. Shot 38% on twos, and again, you see the over-reliance on the push shots at times there, where he's good, he's got good touch, but it's not the sort of thing that you want to bank on as your offensive bread and butter over and over again. So I do have some complicated feelings about leaving Triple J off here, because I do think there is a ceiling that he can reach in terms of being like a really productive offensive player, potentially more efficiently if he has a better three-point shooting season, if he is able to have some more easy offense created for him with Ja out there, although he's never really been a volume pick-and-roll finisher. That's just not really his role. I could definitely see him climbing onto this list. I just think with the offensive inefficiency, with the fact that he's still a very good defender, but there are, to me, better defenders on the fringes of this list. Draymond, his just masterful versatility, his defensive genius, the fact that he does still bring you really high-level rim protection. And the guy who I have in my number 10 spot, Logan, may not have a Defensive Player of the Year award, but to me is a young player who is pretty clearly a better defender than Jaren Jackson Jr. right now. That is Evan Mobley. And the margin to me between number 10 and number 13 on this list is really slim. I do want to be clear about that. But I thought this was an encouraging season from Mobley. And I thought it was particularly an encouraging end to the postseason. That to me is kind of what earned him this number 10 spot. He gave you 16, 9, and 3 this regular season on 63% true shooting. But in the playoffs, I thought he was very arguably the best defender in the field. He was an absurdly dominant rim protector. Players shot just 49% when he was the primary defender at the rim. That is 15% below their average, and he had to hold things down for quite a bit in that playoff run without Jared Allen on the floor as their sole rim protector, and he was excellent in that role. And at the same time, he was like their best option to guard these big wings. He was excellent against Paolo Banchero. Paolo shot 16 of 50 when guarded by Mobley. That's 32%. He moves his feet so well in space. Although Paolo has a bit of a strength advantage, he wasn't able to consistently knock Mobley off his spots. He settled for a lot of tough shots against a lot of size and a lot of length from Evan Mobley, and he guarded Jayson Tatum very well. Tatum was just 9 of 24 when guarded by Mobley. So that sort of elite rim protection and elite switchability, where it's like we can throw you on these really high-level scoring big wings and you can hold your own better than anybody else on our roster, and he's rebounding at a pretty high level, like that is just a level of complete defensive dominance that you are not getting from Jaren Jackson Jr. at this point, even if the block numbers do come back to what they were in his Defensive Player of the Year season. And I'm moved enough by what he did offensively against Boston. That is not to say that Evan Mobley is not a frustrating player to watch offensively. That is not to say that he is not a flawed player offensively. But that series, giving them 22, 9, and 3 on 66% true shooting. The really impressive hook shot making that we saw from him. He shot 57% on hooks in the playoffs. The efficient finishing as a roller was impressive. And the ability to run those delay actions, to run those handoffs as a passer. All of that to me was impressive, and it was encouraging. There's still a ton of room for improvement because I mentioned the hooks were falling in that series. wasn't as much the case in the regular season. And everything outside the restricted area could be frustrating for Mobley. Sometimes his tentativeness, even in the restricted area, was frustrating. So just all that self-created offense, he needs to develop more. He was only a 13th percentile post scorer this year. That can't be the case. There are times where he's going at an equally sized player out of the post, somebody who can hold up in terms of their size and their length, and you're just like, dude, please don't force another hook. Please don't take another tough turnaround. That can be tough, and he needs to become a more reliable shooter to me because he doesn't have that sort of overwhelming strength in the post, and he doesn't have that sort of great touch. But you see the flashes of the jump shooting, and I think that he has to develop more of that to become like a consistent high-level scorer and offensive player. But when I look at everybody below him on this list, I just don't think there's anybody who could have had that all-around impact that he did in the Celtics series, dominating defensively and also giving you that sort of star-level production offensively, really efficiently, just over 1 5-game series. I don't expect that night after night from Evan Mobley, but that was enough for me out of this pretty darn flawed group of contenders to put him in my 10 spot.
So I actually have Mobley higher on this list.
Okay.
Way higher. I have Mobley in my number 6 spot, actually.
Good heavens! Holy mother of God! Whoa! Logan Camden, you never cease to surprise me.
No, I mean, there's a massive discrepancy here. I agree with you completely about the difference in, like, Jaren Jackson Jr. and him defensively.
Uh-huh.
My thing is,
I'm excited. You know me, I love Evan Mobley.
I know you love
him at number 6, but I'm fired up about it.
I know you love Evan Mobley. I think Mobley is capable of being the kind of one-man defense or a kind of game changer like that one way. I think he has that kind of trajectory, and I really was encouraged by his playoff run, man. You mentioned a lot of it. We see the flashes of playmaking. We see some of the jump shooting. That was very brief, right? It was like he hit like 2 threes, and everybody's eyes popped out of their heads.
Oh, I was salivating.
Some of the games, man, the mismatch attacking was really well. Now, there's still one really big flaw that I have with Mobley when he gets those smaller defenders on him. I've mentioned this a lot, but when he gets that smaller guy on him and he pump fakes the first one, and it's like, dude, you're huge. Like, do not just go up with it, Mobley. You're going to make it. You're too damn big. But to me, with the guys like the guys who are more offensively inclined, because I think that's a distinct advantage that basically everybody else below him in between this spot and down to Triple J, they all have their offensive advantages over Mobley, for sure. But I just don't think any of them are single-handedly capable of making a team defense great the way Mobley can. And like I said, I really feel like we have yet to see him have that opportunity to flourish like that. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to be next season, right? The Cavs kind of look like they might run this thing back one more time, which I think is a little bit foolish, but they haven't made any moves that would drastically change the construction of their roster. But it's the gap defensively, man. I think he is one of the handful of best defensive players on the planet, man. His positioning, his instincts, his length. You mentioned one of the numbers. That was from the playoffs, right? In the regular season, he held players just below 10% below their average inside 6 feet. That was the 9th best mark in all of basketball, minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. I'm encouraged by what we saw in the playoffs. I think he's going to get better offensively, but I think he gives me such a consistent and high floor defensively. I really value that, man. I just don't think anybody else on this list is capable of single-handedly changing a defense the way Evan Mobley can, and that's why I have him up this high. I know he's really limited offensively. That's why he can't be any higher on this list, and that's why I would hear an argument for the guys below him, but I really value the defensive floor that Mobley brings, and yeah, I'm super encouraged by this playoff run, man. It might just be the flashes, but I'm hooked, man. Like a fish. Like Mobley got me. He's reeling me in, man. I think he could. I think we can maybe see a little bit of a leap next year, man. I'm encouraged. Not a massive one. I still think he's got that. Who did I call? I called somebody Bambi the other day. Mobley's got a little bit of that Bambi-esque kind of,
little baby deer.
Uncoordination, but so that's always going to be a little bit flawed. But I think he could improve even more offensively. And he has come a far piece from where he was in his rookie season.
Yeah. Oh, he can definitely continue to improve. The thing for me is just where he is now. The offensive inconsistency is pretty glaring compared to everybody above him. And if you want to argue him versus Randle, I'll hear it out because I love Evan Mobley and I do not love Julius Randle. Just that's kind of how I've evaluated these guys for a while. I've been comparatively very high on Mobley, comparatively very low on Randle. I do think that Mobley has a play style that, when maximized, is much more conducive to winning. I just think we need to see more offensive development from him. So I do have Julius Randle in my 9 spot. I just feel that he's too productive to be any lower than this. The fact that he does give you 24, 9, and 5 on 57% true shooting and is the only dude with any sort of star shot creation skill set at this point, and is a really good rebounder and is a capable playmaker, just to me puts him a level above all these other dudes in terms of the impact that he can have, being your number 2 option offensively. And maybe you don't feel great about that, but you think, hey, if we get him on a hot streak for a few weeks because he is such a rhythm player, he is such a streaky player, like, we could go really far with that, with the right roster around him. And I just don't think you can argue that about any of the dudes who are below him. But you mentioned the bad. I mean, the playoff production is all-time brutal. He is up to this point, and it's only been a few series, 2 playoff runs, but like one of the most brutal playoff droppers that we have ever seen in the history of this league. And his game is pretty darn unreliable for a few reasons. One of those being his reliance on tough shot making and jump shooting, where he is just wildly inconsistent. This is season to season. This is week to week, month to month, night to night. It is always a roller coaster with him. But just to illustrate that, over the course of the last 5 years, here's Randle's effective field goal percentage on jumpers in each season. 41%. Up to 50%. That was his breakout 2021 season. And I was skeptical of that at the time because I said this is like an outlier jump shooting season in the scope of his career. Then back down to 41%, which is brutal. Then back up to 50%, which is pretty darn solid. Then back down to 46%. So you just don't know what you're getting from him in that department, even over the course of a year. And in the 2 playoff runs, it's been 33% in terms of his effective field goal percentage on jumpers and 38%. That is just like unplayably bad, especially because he is a high volume player no matter what. And that is another concern and question, especially as the Knicks continue to add more offensive talent and they continue to raise their expectations from now, not, hey, Julius, we need you to carry the load to get us just barely into the playoffs on the back of a strong team defense in 2021. It's like, we need you to fit into a team that can win the title. I do have concerns about that with Randle because I do think he can be a ball stopper. I do think he can be a black hole. I do think he can turn the ball over too much. I do think his shot selection can be frustrating and his shot making can just be really, really bad. And defensively, he's fine, but he is a weak point on what looks to be a pretty stellar defense overall for New York. And also just his attitude, right? His level of engagement can be problematic. I came in here prepared to argue the anti-Julius Randle stuff to explain why I have him down at 9, because I feel like there are some people who might want to have him higher. Of course, Logan, you have gone and one-upped me and you have him off your list entirely, but I'll continue to just explain why I'm not higher on Randle. The Knicks offense was also great without him this past year. Brunson led them to a 21-12 record in the regular season without Julius Randle, and then almost got them to the Eastern Conference Finals down even more dudes. Brunson had them post a 120 offensive rating in minutes where he was on the floor and Randle was off it, whereas if you flip that, Randle on the floor, Brunson off, that offensive rating is only 113, which is not very good at all. So when you are a mediocre efficiency, inconsistent playmaking, ball-stopping, volume player who's not a real plus defender, there's a lot of factors there that make me skeptical of you, especially when you have the playoff track record that Julius Randle does. But again, I do just think that ability to at least be a star shot maker and shot creator, to get Julius Randle at his best, is enough to have him above everybody below him on my list. And I do think this Knicks roster now is just so damn good that if he can play up to his regular season level throughout a playoff run, because they do need that. That's what I don't want to sell short. Like, yes, Brunson can still make them a very good offense. The combination of his volume, the fact that they secure so many extra possessions, but he just can't carry that sort of ridiculous load for an entire playoff run with the lack of creators and real high-end offensive threats alongside him. Randle is important to that formula. I do believe that. Or somebody who can be a legitimate offensive number 2. He's not my favorite option, but the fact that he can do that at all is valuable, and it is a separator when we're talking about these sort of ranks on this list.
It is valuable, and I've seen his really good stretches. I mean, like you said, dude, Randall will have a month where you're like, hot damn, man, is
Oh
this
yeah,
dude one of the best players on the planet? And then he inevitably comes back to earth. My thing with Randall is he just has to show it to me, and he's shown it in the regular
amen, brother.
season. He's just got to show it to me on the playoffs. And you said it, dude. The easiest way for Julius Randle to crack this list, or crack my list at least, next year's time, or to maybe potentially climb higher on your list, is just to do his job in this situation. His job has gotten substantially easier with all the additions the Knicks have made. And we already saw how
Hmm.
great of a basketball team they can be without him, like you mentioned. So Randall's job has gotten significantly easier after this Knicks offseason. And if he can show that he can be a supporting member, just a member of the supporting cast that is just pulling his weight, doing his job, taking smart shots, playing smart ball, I'll put him on here. Because Julius, it's not a talent thing with Randall.
Hmm.
That's what I want to be clear. It is not a talent thing with Julius Randle. It's a mental thing with Julius Randle. It's a consistency thing with Julius Randle. I just need him to show it to me.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man.
And yeah, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that in this different kind of role where he's taking on less responsibility, he can do it.
I'm with you there, dude. And again, it's like I like Evan Mobley relative to consensus, relative to expectations more than a Julius Randle. But the gap in offensive production is pretty darn significant. But honestly, the gap between those two isn't necessarily that big, and I would not really consider Randall any higher than this. I felt pretty solid about him being locked in to my 9 spot. But Logan, you have not revealed your number 9. Who is that lucky feller?
I had a tough time ranking this guy. He is basically the polar opposite of Julius Randle and very similar to what Evan Mobley does defensively, he does offensively. I think this guy can
Ooh.
single-handedly transform your offense if he's on your team, and that's Lauri Markkanen. Uh, I played with Markkanen up to 6.
Whoa.
6 through 10 was really hard to rank. I kind of moved and shuffled these guys all around. The reason that I don't have Markkanen higher on this list is just because I think he's a little bit limited in terms of self-creation. Putting the ball on the floor, like handling. But he's got such a unique skill set. That's what makes this guy really hard to rank. Like, I think he could fit on any basketball team anywhere. I think you could just drop Lauri Markkanen anywhere and he would be a great basketball player. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. It's such an invaluable weapon to have. He shot 41% on catch and shoot opportunities this past season, the most attempts per game, 7.4, and he also had the most points per game off of catch and shoot attempts of any player in the league. Great jump shooter, 42% on jumpers, 42% out of the mid range. Great finisher, 69% in the restricted area, and a great rebounder. I mean, this guy put up 23 points on 63% true shooting. 48% from the field, 40% from three, 90% from the line. Markkanen is just dumb efficient. And the way he relocates off ball, the way he creates and manufactures these shots for himself, how elite he is as a spot up player. Again, I think he could really work anywhere. The Jazz were 8 points better per 100 possessions offensively with Markkanen on the floor. They had an offensive rating of 119.5 with him out there. Dwindles to a 111.5 offensive rating without him out there. Again, the difference maker to me is just, I don't know, other guys I trust to, if I need it in a pinch, to put the ball on the floor, to create for themselves a little bit, to be a little bit more multifaceted offensively. And I want to be clear about something too. I don't even know if these guys. That's the thing that makes Markkanen's game tough is I don't know if they lead to winning more immediately. I think Markkanen has a massive winning impact offensively, and so I think you could argue he has a higher impact. I just think his skill set's a little more limited. He just shot 33% on pull-up jumpers, 33% on step-back threes, 26% on step-backs, 21% on pull-up threes. He's just not a great off-the-dribble creator or self-creator. But again, that's just not his game. So I don't know. I find Markkanen was one of the hardest guys to rank on this list, and I played with him all the way up to 6 because of how great of an offensive player he is. But the two guys above him, I just prefer that they can put the ball on the floor a little more. They can create for themselves. And they both had pretty good playoff runs, both of those guys. So Markkanen was tough. I thought he was going to be higher on my list, but I ultimately have him here at number 9.
I'm absolutely shocked by this. I think that having Evan Mobley at this point above Lauri Markkanen is batshit crazy. Logan, I'm not going to lie to you. I think you might be smoking a little too much of that Celtics series. Like, Markkanen is a bona fide star offensively. And not just that, he is a hyper-efficient star, a dominant off-ball player, and that is such an undersaturated archetype in the NBA. Every single team could inject Lauri Markkanen into their offense and immediately get way better. Like, I was thinking about putting out this Twitter poll today, and then I decided, no, you know what? This is going to make people mad. People are going to be disingenuous about it. They're going to compare, like, the scope of the career accomplishments instead of the peak to peak in a vacuum comparison I'm trying to do. But I was thinking about posing the question of, in a vacuum, at their peak, who is the better offensive player? Klay Thompson or Lauri Markkanen? I honestly think that I would take Markkanen, and I think that you are selling short his ability with the ball in his hands, because no, he is not a high volume on ball creator, but he is completely exceptional away from the ball. And it's not just his ridiculous shooting ability. As you mentioned, the #1 catch and shoot scorer in basketball, the #3 scorer off screens in basketball behind just Steph and Klay. Keep in mind, this dude is 7 feet tall, like he's legitimately an insane movement shooter. It's the off-ball movement, like the stuff that you see from all the greats there, from Steph Curry, from Reggie Miller, the ability to bob and weave, to hit people with head fakes, to create separation away from the ball. Markkanen is the best at 7 feet tall that I've ever seen in that regard, and he does everything offensively efficiently. You just go play type after play type, and it's absolutely ludicrous. He's an 86th percentile roll man, really good screener, lethal popper, obviously. He's an 88th percentile cutter. He runs the floor well in transition, and I mentioned the on-ball stuff to complement all of this incredible play finishing. Like, for his size, dude, he is a fluid ball handler, and for his size, he is a good athlete. He is a good driver, and quite literally everything that he does is extremely efficient. I'm not just talking about true shooting percentage. I'm talking about the intention with every movement, attacking a closeout so decisively, getting to the line at a solid rate. Like, just everything he does offensively is optimized. He can post up and isolate very efficiently, and he has done that over the past couple years in Utah. Again, the volume isn't necessarily what you might expect from a star, but that is because he is playing in a system at such a high level, and he is maximizing what he does best. When he draws a switch off of a screen, you better believe that he can put his back to the basket, he can face up, and he can bully these guards. He can bully these smaller wings. So that's sort of like ridiculous offensive gravity and versatility and efficiency just makes him one of my favorite players in the league. The Utah Jazz, Logan, the Utah Jazz, the tanking, struggling Utah Jazz have played like an 86th percentile offense with him on the floor over the last 2 years. He's improved them just on offense by over 7 points per 100 possessions. That is a massive number, and he's improved them overall by 10 points per 100 possessions. They go from a terrible team with him off the floor to a good team with him on the floor. And defensively, he's passable. He's solid. He can guard in space decently well. He's a good rebounder. He's a decent interior defender. He's fine. So I just think if you're looking at any of these guys and just saying, hey, who is a plug-and-play star who I know is going to impact winning and impact offense at a very, very high level, I think Lauri Markkanen is that guy. I think he is very undervalued and underrated league-wide right now because of the fact that he's playing in Utah, and I think he's an absolute stud. I think having him down at number 9 is pretty crazy. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking about in terms of, you make some great points. Like that's what makes him so hard to rank, man. Is there's not really many guys that play like him. Like his skill set is just so unique. Like, and he does. Utah really is an abysmal situation, man. The fact that they're even like a respectable basketball team, like, period.
He's a 7-foot tall, elite three-point shooter, one of the absolute best in the league, elite off-ball mover, who bullies mismatches, who puts the ball on the floor, who drives, who finishes efficiently, who gets to the line. I mean, he's 23-8 on 63% true shooting. He's replicated that for the last 2 years. He's replicated all of this in tough circumstances. The man's a monster.
The man is a monster. Like I said, man, this list was tough. This was the toughest stretch of my list by far. I feel really confidently in my top 5. The toughest was between 6 and 10. And like I said, man, I shuffled all these guys. I think the margins between them are really, really close. I just think, like, I don't know, I'm realizing the flaw in my argument. I talk about, like, if he was a lead ball handler, like, I wonder if the offense could be any good. The offense is good, and he's not even a lead ball handler. That's kind of the point. Like, he just makes them an elite offense, even without the rock in his hands.
Yeah, dude. It's a consistently undervalued skill set throughout league history. Like, Reggie Miller turns out top 5 offense after top 5 offense. They're a top 8 offense damn near every year. He doesn't have to score 30 points per game. He doesn't have to average 7 assists per game. He is constantly stressing the defense. That's not to say that Lauri Markkanen is Reggie Miller, but he has that same fundamental trait.
And what's so cool about that, though, man, is it's so rare to see guys that just are, like, actively seeking out those opportunities 100% of the game. Like, that's what's beautiful. Markkanen is just actively scanning, where is open space? Is my guy asleep? Can I just relocate back out to the perimeter? Moral of the story is, wherever you have him on your list, please get this man out of Utah and send him to Golden State, and we can see Curry and Markkanen play together, and that would be,
oh my God,
sexual in nature.
That would be completely sexual in nature, bro. Not only do I love Lauri, I've always thought, like, he is the perfect fit in Golden State. Like, nobody outside of Golden State uses off-ball screens more than Utah. Like, they've already been running the motion-based stuff. They understand it. They see the vision. Just plug Lauri into the system in Golden State with Steph Curry, and that would be, to me, offensive euphoria. So I have Lauri a few spots higher than this.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. All right. Who is in your 8th spot, Logan?
So in my 8th spot is Pascal Siakam.
Wow.
The reason that I have Siakam, like I mentioned, over Markkanen is just because I think there's a little bit more of an edge there in terms of self-creation. I think both of these guys are really good mismatch attackers. Siakam, like Markkanen, is also really efficient as a roll man. He's a good popper, not like Markkanen. Markkanen is just one of the best shooters in all of basketball. But I just trust Pascal to create his shot a little bit more on ball than I think I do with Markkanen. I probably slightly prefer him as a defender, although that's close just with Markkanen's length. But that's it. I mean, it's really close between these two guys. But the slight edge was just, I think Pascal has a little bit of a self-creation gap. This season, 22-7-4 on 54, 35, 73 splits, 60% true shooting. He shot 59% on stepbacks this season, 43% on pull-ups, 50% on fadeaways, 42% out of the mid-range. Obviously, Markkanen clears in terms of jumpers and catch and shoots. Like, that is his bread and butter. That is the totality of his game, right? He's just one of the best in all of basketball in that regard. And I really like that we were able to finally see Siakam in a beneficial offensive situation. I think he really complements what Indiana wants to do offensively, spacing the floor. Everybody can handle, everybody can shoot, everybody can decision make, everybody can score from everywhere on the floor. And he really complements Halliburton at a really high level. I don't know if I could move Siakam. I could maybe see Siakam one spot higher on this list, but I think there's still a little bit of a self-creation gap between Siakam and this other guy in terms of fluidity and how far I see the guy in front of him progressing. So if Siakam was a little bit more impactful defensively, if he was better of a number one as an individual creator, I think I could have him higher on this list. But he's definitively one of the best number twos in the league, and I think that's his role. And that's why I have him at number 8. The guy at number 7, I can see being a bona fide number one day, and I think we saw some major flashes of that this last season.
I am so fascinated by your list. This is definitely the most that we've disagreed overall, because I know you have at number 7, Logan. I can read between the lines. You got Paolo Banchero at number 7, which is crazy to me for a few reasons. The fact that you have him above both Lauri and Siakam at this very moment, to me, is very surprising, just because of the level of polish and efficiency that you get from those guys offensively. What is more surprising, though, to me, is that you have Evan Mobley above him. Just because we saw those guys go head-to-head in the playoff series, and it's like, who was the one carrying the load for their team? Who was the one who, it's like, yes, Mobley was playing awesome defensively, but offensively in that series, he was a liability. He was frustrating. I'm very surprised overall. But I have Siakam one spot higher than you at number 7. I thought that he and Lauri was an interesting debate, but for me, it's at 6 and 7. It's not at 8 and 9. And I can absolutely see the argument for Siakam over Lauri because of the fact that he is a more high volume and overall a better creator for himself off the dribble. However, I do think that I prefer the fact that Lauri is able to have such a pronounced impact without needing the ball in his hands. And the difference between him and some other guys who are just like awesome catch and shooters, like we talked about a Michael Porter Jr. last episode, right? There is a completely different level of on-ball capability and of the ability to play off the catch and of the ability to weaponize your shooting threat from a Lauri Markkanen, right? Like what he can do as a driver, mismatch attacker. He's legitimately awesome in those categories. So that to me is like kind of the perfect offensive number 2 that you could dream of. But Siakam's not far off at the 4 spot. Like, I think this dude is awesome. Gave you 22, 7, and 4 on 60% true shooting in the regular season and basically replicated that in the postseason. Just an exceptionally versatile offensive player. Elite in transition, which is perfect in Indiana. A 91st percentile post-up scorer. He is just a walking mismatch, and this is what you see in the Milwaukee series, right? You try to put Brook Lopez on him, and he's just too quick, and he's too good as a popper. You try to put any wing on him, and he's just too big for those guys. The body control. And he's always been known as the Tasmanian Devil because he loves to spin, but that spin is pretty darn effective. He is really tough to prevent from creating a good shot for himself in those one-on-one situations, posting up especially, but isolating as well. And then his ability to run inverted pick and roll is so impressive, especially in Indiana where everybody around him can shoot, can put the ball on the floor, can make good decisions. Like, again, you are just dealing with the dilemma of, do we concede a mismatch to Pascal Siakam, which is a really bad outcome? Do we hedge and then leave the guard, who's the screener, as a popper because Siakam is a pretty good playmaker? He's going to be able to make those reads. Like, that is just another way for him to create really efficient offense. He's a 61st percentile roll man. You can use him as a screener, get him going downhill in that way. It just has so many different weapons, and we talk about the quickness, the athleticism threatening the rim. He shot 45% on 2-point jumpers this past year. I believe he was about 35% from deep, so the jump shot is very legitimate as well. And when I compare him to a Paolo Banchero, who, as you just mentioned, you have above him, I do think he's in a better situation. Obviously, he's playing with better offensive personnel. There's just no question about that. But he is also more refined. He is also smarter. Like in Toronto, he was better at weaponizing his advantages. He was better at creating a high shot quality for himself, whereas Paolo at this point is still prone to settling for more of those tough jumpers, to coughing the ball up more. That's where I just think that Siakam is more consistently efficient and honed in a way that works really in any situation. I really like Paolo, but I think at this point, Siakam to me is still the better basketball player.
I understand that in terms of polish, but I found it really hard to gauge because of how bad Paolo's situation is in Orlando. Like, I think it is just abysmal. Like, the spacing sucked last year. There's nobody else that can really manufacture any shot for themselves. And so I had to kind of balance that. That's what makes it tough, these situations that these guys are in. So you have, I want to be clear, you have Paolo at 8, you have Siakam at 7, Markkanen at 6?
That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah, the advanced numbers are not kind to Paolo, and that's why I considered even having like a Markkanen above him too. The Jazz are 8 points better per 100 possessions offensively with Markkanen. Orlando's 4 points worse with Paolo offensively. Overall, they were 9 points worse per 100 possessions with Paolo on the floor. Like, the advanced numbers aren't kind to him. And I do want to emphasize that fact about Orlando, because throughout the season, and as we were moving into the playoffs, I saw this discourse online, Carson, that, Paolo was a first-time All-Star this year, and he led Orlando to this seed, and he led them to the playoffs in his second season, and why is the media not giving him all this kind of attention? Well, Orlando was great because of their defense, not just because of Paolo Banchero, right? It's the same argument that I made when we were talking about Ja Morant in the point guards episode. Yeah. These teams are great because of that side of the basketball. a side that largely Paolo is not responsible for. Is he an important cog of that machine? Sure. But he's also got Wendell Carter. He's got John Isaac. He's got Jalen Suggs. He's got Franz Wagner. You've got plus defenders everywhere. They were number 3 in defensive rating throughout the season. Now, the reason that I do have him here, though, is that what we saw in the playoffs to me was jaw-dropping. The composure, the level that he was at for a second-year guy, 27 points, 9 boards, and 4 assists on 46, 40, 76 splits, 55% true shooting, just slightly below league average. But the guy hit 330 pieces. I mean, again, in an abysmal offensive situation, Paolo cranked his game up a notch where I just didn't expect that from this young of a guy. And I just think he's going to steadily improve. I think he is going to become a reliable and deadly pull-up three-point jump shooter. I think he's going to become even better as just an overall pull-up jump shooter. I think he's going to become an elite shooter of the basketball. And I think that's going to happen. And then after that, once he starts weaponizing his physicality and working to get downhill more and to get easy stuff, we talk about that a lot. I saw Kevin Durant talking about some player or was mentoring some guy, and he was talking about you got to get the easy stuff for yourself so you can get yourself started and you can get yourself going in games. Once Paolo really starts weaponizing his frame and athletic and physical traits more and working downhill and getting easy looks inside, that's when I think he's, really rounding out and completing his game. He's already a good playmaker. He's already a really good ball handler. He's already a good jump shooter and creator off of the dribble. I just think he's going to steadily improve, man. He's going to become the number one kind of offensive engine that this defensive-oriented Orlando team needs. And I think there's enough of a self-creation gap between Siakam and Markkanen for me to have him this high. Is his winning impact that high right now? I don't think so, but I think it could happen as quickly as next season where we're like, damn, man, Paolo did it. The crux of this is the playoff run, man. I was blown away by this playoff run from Paolo. He balled the F out. I didn't think that was possible from him, and I think he's going to sustain this over the next couple of years. So, yeah, I've got Paolo this high, man. I'm just so supremely confident in this guy becoming a star.
Yeah, he already is a star. I do like Paolo a lot. I want to be clear, though. I'm not projecting growth on this list. I'm focusing on what we have seen from these guys. And you're talking about how sold you were by the playoff run. And there's just no debating that the playoff run was super impressive. But when we talk about how sustainable, how reliable a playoff run is, you do have to look at the fact that it was just some real outlier shot making from Paolo. That's not to say that he isn't a good, tough shot maker, because he takes a lot of tough shots and his balance in those spots is impressive. He makes some really, really nasty contested jumpers. But in the regular season, he was a 40% mid-range shooter. His reliance on those shots was frustrating. In the playoffs, he shot 55% from mid-range. That's just absolutely ridiculous. In the regular season, he was a 34% three-point shooter. In the playoffs, he was 40%. Now, maybe you think that Paolo is a dude who's made for the moment. Maybe you think the fact that he can threaten defenses downhill frees up a bit of a higher shot quality for him. Maybe you think he's going to improve a little bit in the playoffs in those regards for the rest of his career. Whatever you think, what we can say for sure is that that sort of leap is not sustainable. That sort of leap is something that is a product of a small sample size. The fact that he played one series. And beyond that, I don't think that Paolo really played above expectations. I think that he's a good playmaker, and I think in a lot of his ways, the playmaking that he has shown is like the most intriguing part of his game. The fact that at that size, he can make skip passes. He can make reads with anticipation. He's not consistently a great playmaker, but he is already a good one. And that is rare for a 6'10" second-year player. But he also struggled with all that defensive attention, and he had 9 turnovers in game 1. He had 4.6 turnovers per game in that series. The efficiency was still 2.5 points below league average. In the regular season, he was under 55% true shooting. He is just very far, in my opinion, still from being like a refined number one who is going to lead a good offense, because the Magic were a bad offense this year. And as you mentioned, in the regular season, they were a worse offense with him on the floor. So I have him in my 8 spot. And I do think that he's absolutely already clear of Julius Randle because in his first playoff run, in rough circumstances versus a great defense, he already played way better than Julius Randle ever has in the playoffs. And although we talk about his reliance on tough shot making, he does have the playmaking foundation. He is a big physical forward who gets to the line a lot, even if maybe you wish that he weaponized that size and physicality even a little bit more. But there's just some clear areas for improvement. Shot selection, overall efficiency, taking care of the basketball. Defensively, he's fine, but I do think he can be more on that end. It's just a different level of maturity from Siakam and Markkanen. It's a different level of polish, shot selection, consistently weaponizing their physical advantages, their greatest strengths, efficiency, fitting in different situations, versatility. That, to me, it puts those guys pretty clearly above Paolo for now, but I absolutely think that he has the ceiling to sky beyond those guys. I mean, having this sort of ball handling and playmaking and athletic and shot making profile at this age is crazy. He's just still figuring stuff out. This was an encouraging season, an encouraging postseason run, but I do think that the bar from these veteran stars is a little bit higher. But Logan, you have Evan Mobley one spot above him, and you have Evan Mobley above all the dudes who we've just been talking about. We already touched on Mobley a bit, but why is that the case?
So one, I want to start with the reason that Paolo and Mobley are above the other guys that are below them. Both of these guys I look at, and again, I completely understand arguments about here, right now, winning impact. I completely understand all of those. I look at both of these guys as number ones on their respective sides of the floor that they're responsible for. Again, Paolo is not there in terms of winning impact yet, but I'm so confident if it's next year, if it's 2 years from now, Paolo's going to reach there. I don't think Siakam's a number one. I don't think Markkanen's a number one, right? I see Paolo being that one day. And then with Mobley, I look at Mobley as a defensive anchor, as a centerpiece, as a defensive number one. And I just value that skill set slightly, a little bit more right now, right? I think in terms of impact right now for their side of the ball, that's why I would have Mobley just marginally above Paolo. But I debated that one too. I'm just so confident in both of these guys being the centerpieces for their side of the basketball.
Interesting. I do think that fundamentally projection just doesn't factor into this for me. And I think that, as I said, Siakam and Lauri are just a level above Paolo in terms of polish and efficiency and immediate offensive impact. I don't think you want any of those guys to be your number one on a good offense. And I think Siakam and Lauri are much smoother, higher level number twos at this point. I'm just really surprised that you have Mobley this high because I get the argument about him as a defensive centerpiece, but it's like when you're talking about these really, really high level stamped consistent stars like Lauri and Siakam on the offensive end who are perfectly capable defenders, like I just prefer that to somebody who does still have the offensive limitations that Evan Mobley does, because I was hyping up his Celtics series because I did think that was impressive, but like within the scope of that playoff run, within the scope of this season, you have easily as many moments where it's like, Jesus, dude, Evan Mobley cannot make a shot outside the restricted area. Like, you're just so frustrated, and he is a flat-out liability on that end. And the offensively limited, defensively dominant archetype is a valuable one, of course, but it's also a frustrating one. It's also a limited one. And for this moment, I do not think that Mobley is like the most limited, right? He's not Ben Wallace offensively, but he's not a consistent high-level offensive player either. And that's where I just think 6 is like really high. That's really high when you're talking about him being above some of the dudes who are so consistently transformative and at a star-level impact offensively. Very interesting. I love Mobley, but I did not see that one coming before we started recording today. Know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only like 2 days the whole year without a game. 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook.
It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every fan of every sport to bet on at DraftKings. And I know it's early, but football season will be here before you know it.
And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, so we had a very different order, but we have now cleared those 10 through 6 spots. Who is in your number 5 spot, Logan?
In my number 5 spot is Zion Williamson. This past season, Zion put up 23, 6, and 5 on 57, 33, 70 splits, a true shooting percentage of 61%. Much like Markkanen, man, Zion's just got such a unique freaking basketball game, man. He is... I'm trying to come up with a good... He's just a bowling ball, man. He's a boulder.
We were pretty close there.
Yeah, it's like... just something rolling downhill, man.
Yeah.
He's the thing chasing Indiana Jones, man. But it's different. I want to ask you, Carson, like in terms of just downhill physical imposition, strength, like how many guys would you take above Zion, like historically? Could you name 5 to 10 guys you'd take as like a downhill just rim pressure?
No, dude, listen, I've said this before. People get mad at me when I say it, but I think in terms of just purely pressuring the rim as a finisher, as a scorer from the perimeter, Zion is the most overwhelming force that we have seen in this league. He comes into the league as a rookie. He leads the league in restricted area makes. Next year, makes inside of 5 feet. He averaged 9.3 per game. Next was Giannis, Logan, at 7.5. There was that big of a gap. Like, when he is healthy and available, there is nobody in the history of this sport who has pressured the rim quite like Zion. To have that sort of 99th percentile first step with 99th percentile bounce with 99th percentile strength. I mean, more than 99th percentile, dude. He's 6'6", 285 pounds. Who can absorb that explosiveness and that contact and that ability to get up in the air and maneuver? It's ridiculous. So even if you say, okay, I prefer peak LeBron, whatever, like, he's top 2, bro. From the perimeter, he is top 2 in just that sort of downhill force and finishing. Purely at the rim, of course.
I think that's a good caveat to add. It's and the other guys maybe you could point to, you know, a Giannis, a Shaq, you know, if you're looking at just
well, that's why I'm saying initiating from the perimeter. Shaq is the greatest at-rim force that we have ever seen. But just the volume and efficiency from Zion is objectively unrivaled from the perimeter.
It's insane, and it's everything, man. The way he can absorb the contact, the way he can change his attempt midair, also the touch. That's what I think gets lost in it too, man. I think when people just like imagine Zion, it's just him flying through the air, you know, yamming on somebody, and yeah, that's cool. The touch is insane to me. The way he throws it up. I mean, he has got elite touch to go along with the elite physical attributes. And that's why I think you've got to have him this high, man. I think there's a clear difference. Like, I think there's a very, very large gap between 5 and 6. And,
agreed.
Like, this group, I think the top 5 is really concrete. And it's a shame because, one, I want to get this off my chest. I don't understand why they do not count play-in games as, like, real numbers or stuff, like on Basketball Reference and
Gotta change that.
NBA.com. It's like, why are we playing these games if they're not going to count towards averages? Me, personally, I would just make the play-in a part of your playoff numbers and your playoff history.
I agree.
And even if you look back and it's a one-game playoff, you go, oh, well, they just lost in the play-in, right? It makes sense. Or if they were a lower seed and they played 2 games, oh, they played 2 play-in games, right? So I just – that's what sucks. You go back and you look for the game. It was against L.A., yeah? Mm-hmm. When they closed out with, like, Alvarado and Larry Nance and the B team, and Zion is leading them back. That is an awesome defense with pretty good personnel. And, right, I know the Lakers get mashed on by the Nuggets every time, but the Nuggets are also the best offense in basketball. So I'll cut them some slack. That is a very good defense in L.A. with one of the best defenders on planet Earth, and they had absolutely no answer for this guy. The playmaking that comes off of that rim pressure is elite, and I think Zion has grown there in terms of his unselfishness. And he has a limit or two, right? I don't think Zion's a great defender at this point in his career. He is very flawed as a jump shooter. If my stats are correct here, according to NBA.com, Carson, Zion Williamson attempted over or under 19.5 jump shots last season.
I believe that he attempted 19.
My numbers say 18.
I tweeted that stat once. 18.
That's ridiculous, right? The fact that a guy can be this effective offensively without even being able to stretch the floor is ridiculous. But I don't really hold that against him at all because he is one of the greatest physical outliers this sport has ever seen and one of the greatest downhill rim pressures of all time. And that just gives you such a high baseline for offense. I think you can build a very, very good offense around him, and that's what I think the Pelicans should do. He is your one building block. He is your one foundational piece. He is your guy. And what he showed you in this one playoff game is enough for me to say, all right, let's put our chips into the table. Let's move off some of these other guys that maybe don't fit alongside him, and let's build a great team. And I think the Pelicans have the framework for that. Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, perfect complementary pieces. Move off BI, move off McCollum, see what DeJounte can do for you. Get some more complementary guards, guys who can fill it up, a big man, and go to work. Zion, I think, has to be on the list. I think he has to be this high. He is just one of the greatest physical outliers and rim pressures in NBA history, man. Now,
Absolutely.
His limitations are why he can't go any higher, but that one A-plus skill set, that one A-plus trait puts him here.
I mean, it's A+++++. It's a GOAT level trait, dude. And I'm just going to bring some more numbers to substantiate what I said about him being number one ever in terms of perimeter rim pressure, because I know that people will get upset about that, because anytime that you say an individual player is the best at one specific thing ever, if they're not like a GOAT level all-around player, people will say, haven't you heard of LeBron? Haven't you heard of Michael Jordan? Wes Unseld is the greatest screener ever, folks. Sorry that it's not Shaq, okay? Deal with it. But Zion has easily cleared that in every season of his career. And as I mentioned, his best number is 9.3, dude. So he's just an absolute one-of-one freak. And I'm with you. He's in a tier of his own in this 5 spot. You certainly can't argue him any higher. I certainly don't think you can argue him any lower. He's stamped as a top 20 dude when he is on the floor. The efficiency, the rim pressure is overwhelming. And you could argue that it's kind of tricky to build a team around Zion because he is an undersized 4 who doesn't defend at a high level, who positionally doesn't rebound super well, and who is like exclusively a paint scorer. So you want to have a 5 who can both protect the rim and space the floor at a high level, and then you want to have shooting kind of all around him because he's this downhill force. Like, I can see how he is a little bit of a wonky star to build around, but my God, is he a great star. And I think if you give him that really high-level defensive 5, I'm not as worried about the floor spacing, although it would be nice, and you put really good shooting around him, and you put that one ball handler, not the clunkiness of BI and CJ, but that one dude from the perimeter, I think the ceiling is the roof, because that stress that he puts on a defense, possession after possession, when he is aggressive, is just unmatched by everybody below him on this list. And the playmaking that we saw from him this year, taking on even more ball handling role. Point Zion. He's really, really efficient creating from the perimeter in an on-ball role, and he's a lethal cutter. Just an absolute weapon, dude. So I think that he has to be in this number 5 spot.
I think you're right. It is a little bit clunky, but he's so overwhelming, like, as that on-ball guy. I think he can be a number 1. And I'm thinking about ideal spots. I don't know how the hell this would work with, like, the new cap space stuff. An ideal fit, like if we were thinking about like the ideal situation, if there was any way the Oklahoma City Thunder could get like Zion Williamson, I think that is like the perfect fit. Like, I think a lot of guys fit there, and maybe it ruins like their 5 out, but you've got the floor spacing, rim protecting, rebounding 5 in Chet. You've got the lead ball handler in SGA. I think everybody would kind of enhance each other in that situation. That's kind of the ideal fit. It's tough. Like, you know, New Orleans isn't just going to give up on him, but
No.
that kind of situation I think would be ideal for Zion.
Yeah, anywhere where you have a bunch of ball handling would be super fun, but I think that
Maybe even
just
like
all-around offensive skill. But, man, I just think it's shooting, dude, and you've already got Trey. You've already got the defensive wings. Like, I think New Orleans, man, they're a star trade away.
If they could get Trae Young, man. If they could get Trae Young, I'd be interested.
If they got Trae Young. Exactly. I think that would be incredible. I think that would make them a dominant offense. So I do think there are multiple ways to win around Zion, and I think he's unequivocally the piece that they have to build around. The dude is just a freak.
The last spot, too, I just wanted to mention, like Indiana, too, would be just like a haven for him, man. All the offensive talent.
Put him in the
there.
Spicy P role. Sorry, Spicy P. Zion Beta. Yeah, no, that'd be nasty. All right, so now we get to the good stuff, Logan. It's all been good stuff. We've already done an hour. You guys have loved every second of it. But this is where we get into the superstar range, and I think there are some very interesting debates to be had. Who is in your 4 spot, Logan?
At number 4, I have Kevin Durant, and it was tough ranking these guys, man. I would hear an argument for KD all the way up probably to number 2. I'd hear any of these guys at the number 2 spot. I think there's a definitive number 1, but
yes,
and it's hard to evaluate 2 with KD, and just because of his situation. And I want to be clear about something too, because it's a great offensive situation, right? All the skill out there, all the talent of these guys. But in terms of team success, I just don't think the Suns are built to be real contenders. Their defense is not great enough to contend right now. And so I don't hold like the Suns' shortcomings against KD. KD is still damn good. And KD is still great at all the things he's always been great at, man. This last season, 27 points, 7 boards, 5 assists on 52, 41, 86 splits, 63% true shooting. Good defense, good playmaking. And again, man, the classic KD stuff that we're used to, shooting over the top of everybody. Dude, KD was 77% inside the restricted area, man. Shot 54% on stepbacks, 52% out of the mid-range, 50% on fadeaways. KD is still every bit the shot maker that he once was. Like, post-injury, that's super impressive too, dude. The reason that I have KD below these other guys, like LeBron, I still prefer LeBron's physical imposition on the game, the way he can just control a basketball game with his strength, how efficient a post-up touch is for LeBron and the attention that he brings, the control of the game with his brain and decision-making, the playmaking. I still think there's a gap there. And with how efficient LeBron was as a jump shooter last year, I just don't think there's enough of a gap there for me to definitively put KD over him. Is it close? Mm-hmm. For damn sure. This is not a major gap by any means. Both of these guys are still A1, Tier 1 superstars, but I just prefer LeBron's physical imposition on the game, his strength, his athleticism at this point in his career, which is also ridiculous to be saying about a 39-year-old.
Baffling.
I think, I'm not sure because I didn't write these numbers down, but I believe at a point in this year, it was the most efficient that LeBron had ever been as like a at-rim finisher or something like that, and the most efficient he had ever been as a jump shooter. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason, I'll go ahead and spoil this, we'll talk about this here in a minute. The reason I don't have LeBron higher, I have LeBron at number 3. I'll go ahead and I'll spoil that one.
Spoilers! We haven't even talked about KD. I haven't even given my KD take.
I think there's a physical exertion gap that LeBron just can't match between the number 1 and number 2 guys. That gap is not big enough between KD and LeBron for me to put KD over him, but that is the component that limits LeBron. Still, top 4 is loaded. This is one of the most loaded positions in all of basketball, and I would hear you out for any kind of order of this top 4.
I would too. I'm a little bit bummed that you already spoiled your LeBron ranking because I didn't know what to expect. And in fact, Logan, that's not really what I expected from you. I am interested to have that conversation. KD is in my number 4 spot as well. And I would hear an argument for him up to number 2 because he's still a dominant offensive player and a seamless fit anywhere offensively. The ability to just completely kill you as a scorer with ridiculous efficiency on and off ball, 82nd percentile spot up player, 72nd percentile isolation scorer, 84th percentile pick and roll, 63% true shooting in the regular season, and in the playoffs, still against that Minnesota defense, put up 27 a night on 65% true shooting, is just outstanding. It's a reason that he's one of the best offensive players that this game has ever seen, and his shot making was so great in that Minnesota series that he still got his. Now, his numbers are a little bit fluffed by game 4. He and Book both went crazy. That was a legitimate performance, not to discredit it, but, neither of them had played their best through the first 3 games, although KD was better between the two. But he shot 53% on 2-point jumpers and 42% from 3 in that series. It's ridiculous. And that's what he's capable of in any matchup. You cannot take away that level of absurd shooting over the top at his size. So he is still a completely brilliant scorer. However, he's not the same scorer that he used to be because of the lack of rim pressure. He can still absolutely dominate you with ridiculous shooting over the top. He can also struggle more, though. And we saw that in the 2022 playoffs against the Celtics when these physical, great athletes at the point of attack on the wings really gave him more trouble than we've ever seen in the playoffs. Last year was not a bad playoff run overall for KD, but it wasn't the most efficient. It wasn't the most impressive. You saw a big physical wing defender like Aaron Gordon was able to get up in his airspace and bother him some, and he doesn't have that baseline. You talk about him telling the young buck to get the easy stuff. Unfortunately, KD doesn't get the easy stuff so much. He is such a ridiculous shooter that he's always going to be able to produce. He's always going to be able to do so pretty damn efficiently. But even though I trust him way more as a pure scorer than a Jayson Tatum, Tatum can just impose himself on the game in so many different ways. And I do think that that probably slightly offsets that. LeBron would have the same advantage in terms of his physical play, his strength, and his playmaking edge, as you mentioned. But it's really slight in all of these cases. I just think KD probably can't carry the load of either one of those dudes because of the all-around play of Tatum, because of the scoring playmaking combo of LeBron. But like, if you put KD with another superstar and a good basketball team, ironically, because you can't just say other superstar, he has Devin Booker, but his ability to be that sort of like 1B, to be like the perfect number 2, still does remain. But I do think that he is just a tiny bit behind the guys in the number 2 and number 3 spot at this point.
So who do you got in your 3 spot, man?
I'm with you, dude. I have LeBron in my 3 spot. So why don't you explain why that's the case first?
For all you Bron sexuals out there that are offended that LeBron is not number 2 or number 1 on this list, I'd hear an argument.
Number
Dude,
one.
LeBron on his best...
No, not for number 1. Not for number 1.
At his apex on his best game, man, if LeBron was going balls to the walls for one game, I'd hear you out. LeBron's still that dude, man.
No, he's
like
incredible.
LeBron is still that guy in single game formats, and that's what makes him so damn deadly. And he is legitimately, I said this on one of our other shows, he's one of 2 guys to ever defeat Father Time. Tom Brady and LeBron James did the impossible. He did it. Like, the fact that he is still balling at this level is unparalleled. I can't think of another guy, like outside of a Brady in another sport, that had this kind of longevity and lasted. And maybe I'm ignorant to some other sports, like if it's baseball or something, but that's something I want to be clear about too. There's such a different kind of physicality and physical toll that gets taken on your body in these sports.
Novak Djokovic, 37 years old, tore his meniscus a month ago, made the finals at Wimbledon.
A month ago?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I'm going to have to expand my list to 3 gentlemen who defeated Father Time.
Let's
Novak
go!
Djokovic has earned his way on the list.
Thank you.
The reason that I can't have LeBron higher, and all those great things that I still said about him are still true. LeBron has a mastery of the game, brain-wise, decision-making-wise, playmaking-wise, that few have possessed, and he still has that. I'm talking about the elite playmakers in the game today. Jokic, Luka. LeBron still got that. He's one of the greatest passers of all time. He's one of the smartest basketball players of all time. He's one of the great decision makers and advantage creators of all time. The strength and athletic advantages that he has, where he can go to a post-up, and it's one of the most efficient plays in basketball. The attention that he brings on, like, the help side. Because you got to bring 2. You put a guy one-on-one with LeBron, toast. Done. Sorry. That post-up is a bucket. The level that his shot was at, the level that he was finishing at the rim, it's ridiculous. Even with Jayson Tatum's flaws and his inconsistencies offensively, even with Giannis's flaws offensively, it's the physical exertion factor that LeBron just cannot go 100% every single game, every single play, every single time he's on the floor, and that's what's going to keep him from being higher. All of Jayson Tatum's flaws, all of his offensive shortcomings, and how frustrating he can be as a basketball player. Look, you guys, I am not a Jayson Tatum fan. I've been very critical of him in the past. Jayson Tatum plays hard as fuck, and I really value that, man. I really value that. Jayson Tatum plays with his heart on the line. And it's just because he's younger. LeBron just can't do that at this point, man. He's an old guy, and I understand that. The fact that he's still number 3 at this stage in his career is ridiculous, but it's that physical exertion gap. That's why I can't have him higher, because I just know with Tatum, with Giannis, if they're out there, man, they're going to give me their all every single time they're on the floor. again, in a one-game format, I would hear you, dude. I'd hear you for LeBron is still this kind of guy, but
Yeah.
that's not the way that we're viewing these things. I'm viewing this through an 82-game season, a playoff run, and I just trust those guys to give me their all more and to be more readily available. Now, I can't really say that about Giannis because he's missed significant playoff time now in terms of availability, but when he's out there on the court, I know that there's no stop. He's going to give me 100%.
Yeah, dude. This is really as close as it gets for me between LeBron and Tatum. We did our top 10 players in the league at the end of March before the playoffs. I had them one spot apart. I had LeBron at number 8. I had Jayson Tatum at number 9. I'm flipping on that now, and it basically comes down to what you hit on. Just the ability to impact every facet of the game, night after night, for 48 minutes. It really is just a question of age and what the body can handle at this point, because I have the utmost confidence in LeBron producing offensively. Like, he is good at literally everything on offense. He's still a top 5 transition player. He's still one of the strongest downhill forces in the league. He just had an unreal jump shooting season, 41% from deep in the regular season, 39% from deep in the playoffs. He is still so dialed in on attacking mismatches at every possible opportunity. He's a 74th percentile post-up creator, 61st percentile isolation creator. Does not carry the same on-ball load that he has for so many years, but when he does, he's a 75th percentile pick-and-roll creator. Still so dangerous getting downhill. Still so good creating. For AD as a conventional roll man. For Austin Reeves as a ghost screener. He can still make just about every pass in the book. And he can finish plays as a roller. He was 72nd percentile there. Because of his shooting, he was a 79th percentile spot-up player. Like, he gave you 28, 7, and 9 on 64% true shooting in the playoffs and 26, 7, and 8 on 63% true shooting in the regular season. That level of volume and efficiency of scoring and playmaking production, like, we still haven't seen that from Jayson Tatum. And I do think that LeBron is clearly a better offensive player than Tatum. I honestly don't think that that's an argument. I just think at this point, the exertion element, the rebounding impact, the defensive versatility that you get from Tatum does slightly put him past LeBron. And a big thing for me with Tatum is you think about how impactful he was in this postseason run. And then you think about the fact that it was like kind of the worst case scenario for him as a scorer. That's not to say that Jayson Tatum has not been, over the last few years, frustratingly inconsistent as a scorer, because that has been a concern. And in a lot of ways, that concern was just reaffirmed this past year. LeBron doesn't have that. LeBron is always going to create a really high shot quality for himself. He doesn't settle as much as Jayson Tatum does. And he also creates even better shots for his teammates because he's the better playmaker. You can bank on that night after night more than you can with Tatum. But in a lot of ways, this was a really impressive playoff run from Tatum because it was career best playmaking, because it was elite rebounding, because he was able to act as your center defensively, taking away the lobs to Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively that have been so vital to that Mavs offense, and then also having the ability to switch onto Luka Doncic, to switch onto Kyrie Irving. Center defensively, point guard offensively, to me, he's the most versatile player in the league, and he does have a night after night impact separate of scoring that is really, really rare, and in some ways is one of one in the league today. And LeBron, it's just pretty average defense at this point, and he picks his spots. Like, if you're telling me fourth quarter, I need somebody to go out there and create a high shot quality for my team, I'm still taking LeBron over Jayson Tatum. But over the course of a run, when you consider all of these aspects, I'm slightly going to lean Tatum. But it does pay me a bit because I know what I'm getting from LeBron when it matters most. It's just like you can't feel him in every moment of a game in the way that you can a younger superstar. In the KD comparison, though, because I do think that's the other conversation, LeBron just feels more matchup impervious to me at this point because KD can be confronted with those big-ass physical wings who can give him a little bit trouble. LeBron still bullies basically everybody. Just that strength, that IQ, that versatility dominates really regardless of matchup whenever he wants to. So I do think he is clear of KD, and I debated this Tatum thing up until the last minute, but I'm going to have LeBron at 3 and Tatum at 2.
I completely agree. And I know that the finals left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, like they bit into a lemon with Jayson Tatum. Tatum gives you 22, 8, and 7 on 39, 26, 93 splits, 51% true shooting.
Thank God he was so good from the line, huh?
Fun fact, Tatum had the 8th lowest true shooting percentage of any 20-point per game scorer in a single NBA Finals post-merger. Because of this, rough. I think Tatum has strangely kind of become underrated amongst certain NBA circles, and I have been a Jayson Tatum detractor. I've talked about his offensive shortcomings, how frustrating he can be, the reliance on the jump shot, the settling for it. I also understand the fact that Jayson Tatum is a cornball. I think we can completely and totally just put that out there and admit it. Jayson Tatum is a cornball. Cornballs get no respect. We realize that with Russell Wilson, Carson. I think we can come to that conclusion with Tatum. That is a big reason why he will never get any respect. We did it!
Yeah. Well, you got to hit the first we did it. You got to hit the looking down, reflective, in disbelief. We did it. We did it!
Yeah, nice Disney movie, Jayson Tatum. Thanks, bro. Way to put a bow on your run. One of the corniest things I've seen in sports. So,
bro,
I understand.
Didn't you say something like, I'm not going to hate on Jayson Tatum when you started this?
Maybe I will hate on Jayson Tatum. All right, I had to get that out the way.
That's what you're doing.
But I think he's become underrated because of those factors. And it was an abysmal playoff and finals run in terms of efficiency. Every single game, it's like you're sitting on pins and needles waiting. Is today going to be the day that Jayson Tatum gets his jumper going? Because he's a great shooter. I don't care what the numbers say from last season. I believe that Tatum is a great shooter of the basketball. I just think he had a bad run. That's going to happen sometimes. But because people got lost so much in the numbers and the averages and the shooting and the scoring, I think they just took for granted everything else he did. The initial dribble penetration in the shots that he is generating for this Celtics offense. Like the hockey assists, the double hockey assists where, it's getting swung around the horn 3 or 4 times to creating the shot. Tatum created the initial dribble penetration.
The triple hockey assists. Don't forget the triple hockey assist, Logan.
The playmaking, the making good decisions, the defensive playmaking, and like you mentioned, the defensive responsibility. If it's the lead wing, if it's the lead guard, if it's a lead center, very few guys have that kind of defensive positional versatility in the league today. That is an invaluable skill set. The rebounding. He's one of the best rebounding wings in basketball. It's a conglomerate. It's the way he impacts the game in so many different ways. And honestly, I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of it. How many guys can score the basketball inefficiently and still be this impactful?
Yeah.
And this effective? I have done a full 180 not a full 180. I've done like a 90-degree shift on Jayson Tatum. I still think he's a cornball. He still frustrates me scoring the basketball. But I need to appreciate all the other great things that he does on the basketball court. And I think if you're just relentlessly clowning the guy because he didn't shoot well, I just think you're overlooking how great of a basketball player he is. And yes, he plays on a great basketball team, but you still need to appreciate all the great things that he does on the basketball court. And that's why he's number 2, man. Very few guys in the NBA today impact the game in as many ways as Jayson Tatum does.
Yeah, it's tough to have a normal, honest conversation about Jayson Tatum. You're either going to encounter people who are too high, who say, he just won a title, he's the ultimate winning basketball player, he's easily clear of Luka Doncic, he's top 3 on the planet. Or you see people who say, great team merchant, look at purely the scoring and efficiency, didn't win finals MVP, didn't win conference finals MVP, not top 10. I think he's absolutely cemented himself as a top 10 guy. I think that he is a top 8 guy, and the needle hasn't been moved dramatically from where I've been on Jayson Tatum, but I do think that he's improved his stats a little bit. Like I said, I had him at number 9, 1 spot behind LeBron towards the end of the regular season. Now I have him 1 spot above LeBron here in our power forward rankings. I do think he's probably the most versatile player in the league. And I do think a lot of what he did was underrated by some in the finals specifically, because there was so much attention, so much credit given to Jaylen Brown for everything, really, for his scoring, but also for taking on the defensive matchup with Luka Doncic and doing quite well in that matchup. But if you ask me what the most important part of Boston's defensive success was in that series. It was the ability to switch everything and to have Tatum guarding the centers, because you're negating the advantage, right? You're not allowing those guys to get behind you on the roll by sending two to the ball like OKC had to. And Jayson Tatum is somebody who those guys cannot bully whatsoever. They cannot have an advantage against him on the glass. And if you do switch him onto Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, you know that Jayson Tatum can hold his own at a pretty darn high level there. That's a special level of versatility, and it changed that series. And his ability to constantly hunt Luka Doncic, to hunt weak points on Dallas's defense and create advantages. Like, he created kick out pass after kick out pass, lay down pass after lay down pass. So he's improved in several ways. He's gotten bigger and stronger. He's gotten better as a playmaker. He's rebounding, not just as one of the best wings. I mean, he's the best rebounding forward in basketball outside of Giannis Antetokounmpo, I would say, at least off the top of my head. And that was just so essential to this title run in so many ways. So I don't want to overlook the scoring inconsistency, because it's still frustrating, and it is an anomaly among these top four guys. 55% true shooting, 25 a night. Not great over the course of this playoff run. He had 7 games shooting 40% or worse. He had 6 games in the playoffs scoring 20 points or fewer. He shot 37% from mid-range and 28% from 3 in the playoffs. And he took a lot of those shots. Like, there is an erratic element there that you don't get from LeBron, that you don't get from KD. But he's so close to, like, just putting it all together over that one run, because the number of ways in which he can impact the game is just ridiculous. And I do think that when he has that good jump shooting run, like, it's actually pretty clear that he's number 2 in terms of the all-around impact. And I don't think you can just write that in, fill that in, and say, oh, that's going to happen, because we go based on what we've seen. But I think the level of impact that he was able to achieve in this playoff run with really poor jump shooting, knowing the level that he is at normally as a jump shooter, being a good jump shooter who, yeah, can rely on the pull-up jumpers too much, can go cold there, but overall, over the course of his career, of the past few seasons, is undeniably a much better jump shooter than he showed. That's ultimately why I have him at number 2, just above LeBron, even though I do think LeBron is the better and more consistent offensive basketball player.
We do go off what we've seen. And one of the things that we also have seen is Jayson Tatum dropping a 50-piece in the playoffs. Like, this is also a guy, like, I think you hit a big key in your spiel, Carson, is that the fact that this is probably the absolute bottom scoring the basketball that we should ever see from Jayson Tatum. This is about as bad as I think it could ever get, and he still was super impactful. If he can just fuse basically those last couple of playoff runs together, if we can take the torrential dominant pull-up jump shooting that we saw from that run, put it together with all the other great things that he did in this playoff run, you're looking at one of the most well-rounded and complete players in all of basketball. I think we're going to see a progression to the means in the coming years.
I do agree. The one thing that I'm just going to say is this is 3 postseasons where you're talking about 20-plus games from Jayson Tatum. Over the course of the last 3 years, that's almost a full season of basketball, and the true shooting percentage is still under 57, and the jumper has had its cold stretches in every one of them. That's the one spot where it's like, I do agree. I think it can only get better from here. I do think he's improved as an all-around basketball player over the course of these runs, because the playmaking is its best. The turnovers were limited so much more than they were in, like, the 2022 finals run. I'm fundamentally with you, but I do just want to acknowledge that, like, he's undeniably more inconsistent as a scorer, like a lot more inconsistent as a scorer than Kevin Durant, than LeBron. But the all-around impact is pretty fantastic. Number 1, Logan, I don't think we need to waste a lot of time. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't think there's any argument. Don't argue Jayson Tatum. Don't argue LeBron James to me. Argue them against each other, because that's an interesting argument, and it's very, very close. I don't hold it against you, whoever you have. Giannis is in a tier of his own.
Giannis has been one of the top 3 players in all of basketball for the last 3 to 5 years. I mean, he's one of the most dominant physical forces we've ever seen. Talk about Zion, talk about Shaq, talk about Giannis. I mean, he is just unstoppable sometimes. And, like, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. Like, it's brute force, but the area where I've been most impressed with Giannis growing is his playmaking. Giannis has always been a super impactful defender, been a great rebounder, been one of the most physically imposing guys in all of basketball. But some of these kickouts, man, on these drives are utterly ridiculous. And last year, that's the biggest area where I saw where I really didn't like watching Giannis play over the last couple years. I don't. He has not been one of I'm not a big fan of watching Giannis play. I hadn't been a big fan of watching Embiid play. I'm still not the biggest Embiid guy, but the playmaking growth that we saw from Giannis this last year, I enjoyed watching Giannis play. Like, some of the kickouts were sick, and the level of defensive attention that he garners, where 3 or 4 guys have their heads swiveled to Giannis in the paint, it's that gravity thing that we talk about with Steph, man. There's just, you have to commit so much defensive attention to Giannis. Because if you don't, he's just going to go through you. He's just going to destroy you. And we saw Giannis climb the mountaintop a couple of years ago. He's been definitively stamped ever since that 50 points in a closeout game of the NBA Finals. I just want to see him healthy again. I think that's really the only knock that you can have on Giannis at this point. And for the majority of players that we've mentioned in these lists, I don't really hold that against him. Now, obviously there's a track record. We've seen it now 2 years in a row where he struggled to be on the floor. But I'm not raising any alarm bells, right? I think those are just kind of freak injuries. And again, if I'm not going to factor it in for a guy like Kawhi, if we're not really going to factor that in, when Giannis is out there on the basketball court, there really is no argument. To me, this guy is the second best player in all of basketball. I would have him number 2, just behind Nikola Jokic. And it's not really a huge debate for me. I think you have to have Giannis as the number 1 guy. He is just so dominant. Does he have his flaws? Yeah. He's never really going to be able to space the floor. He's not going to be a guy that I really want to go to in a late game scenario if I need somebody to create a shot from the perimeter. I'm still worried about that, right? But those concerns aren't enough to knock him down a peg or knock him down on this list. Giannis is one of the most dominant basketball players we've ever seen. His two-way impact is massive. I think he's just so clearly head and shoulders number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just ridiculous what he's done as an engine for regular season dominance. All the way back to 2019, dude, with Giannis on the floor in games that he's played, the Bucks have maintained a 58.5 win pace. When he's out, they're a sub 500 team. Just the number of ways in which he has dominated the game over the years. You see it in the box score. You see it with the defensive impact. You see it with the efficiency. He's just an absolute world beater. I do want to shout out some of the specific ways in which he improved this year. You mentioned the playmaking. I think that he is at his best ever in that regard. I think overall his offensive shot selection and efficiency was the best that we've seen. He is taking fewer threes than ever before. God bless him. He is getting all the way to the rim more than ever before. And I want to see him and Dame accomplish more this next year than they did this past season. I think that they can still find more synergy in their 2-man game. The Bucks just added Gary Trent when we're recording this. Spoiler, it's a little bit locked and loaded for you guys, but I really like that, adding a wing with that sort of dynamic shooting, who also has shown that he can defend. He can be a pest on that end when he wants to be. There was a lot wrong with the Bucks this past year. None of it really was Giannis. He didn't have his best defensive season, but he did have his best offensive season. And he gave you 30.5, 11.5, and 6.5 on 65% true shooting. In the playoffs since 2021, he's 30, 13, and 6 on 58% true shooting. What he did in the 2021 run, what he did in 2022, down Chris Middleton, even if the efficiency isn't great, the sheer volume, the stress that he put on that Boston defense, just the unrelenting rim pressure and creation for his teammates, and he's only improved offensively since then. He's just in a different level in his ability to completely take over a game, and because he's so relentless downhill, he's so big, he's so strong, the gap between him and Tatum in terms of the consistency of that impact is big, even though Giannis's lack of half-court skill, lack of half-court shot making can be an issue in those late game situations. That's why I've had Nikola Jokic above him as the best player alive for the past couple of years. But against everybody else, I mean, he's just too great for that to really matter, in my opinion. Logan, would you like to ask your favorite question at the end of all these shows?
Carson, who do you think is most likely to drop off this list, and who do you think is most likely to leapfrog on this list? And I thought you had an interesting answer last time, so I'll expand it. who is most likely to get on this list for next season, and long term, who do you think is most likely to get on this list?
Very interesting question, Logan. So, I think most likely to drop is probably Julius Randle if he really pisses me off. But no, it's actually probably Mobley. Like if Mobley stagnates or takes a step back offensively, I could see it being him. It's one of those two. It's one of the two guys in my 9 or 10 spot. I'm going to say Randle, though, because I think Mobley is on an upwards trajectory. I do not think that is the case for Julius Randle. Most likely to join, I mean, I can definitely see the Triple J case. I can see a case for my boy Jaren Johnson. I love that man. I'm trying to think about some other young guys who are at least on the outskirts of this conversation. I like Jabari Smith. I don't think that Jabari Smith is quite there. I think that it's honestly probably Triple J most likely to join, Jalen Johnson, and then I guess if we're going like real long term, I would shout out Alex Sarr from this year's draft.
I like those picks. For my list, I'd probably say actually most likely to join on the inverse of you is Julius Randle. If he has a great, if he has a great run, if he actually does his job, I could see it. And then most likely to drop. I'm pretty confident.
Well, guess what, buddy? You can't have 11 dudes in your top 10.
It's so real, man.
So when Julius Randle proves both of us wrong, but especially you, and averages 30 points per game in a title run, somebody's got to go.
I guess I would say Triple J.
R.I.P. Triple J.
If same thing with Mobley, if he just like stagnates, I still just think there's a big enough defensive gap there where I just don't really. I think Mobley's stamped defensively.
He is. What an amazing defender he is. All right, folks. Well, that does it for our top 10 power forwards. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there is plenty more Nerd Sesh content. You can find all of our shows on our YouTube page. You can listen to them across audio platforms. If you've enjoyed, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can give us a rate and review on whatever audio platform. You can also catch all of our trivia shows, which we have been doing a bunch of throughout this summer. Tons of fun guests. You can find all of that on both video and audio. You can find all of our trivia clips on TikTok, stuff from the show and stuff that we record just the two of us alone here staring deeply into each other's eyes. That is on our TikTok, on our Instagram, on our Twitter, and you can check out our Discord if you want to talk to the fellas. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. You can also check out our merch to get that beautiful hat that is on Logan's beautiful shining bald head. The link to that is at thevolume.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.